Hello everyone, this is JPL, and today I'm joined with,
Matthew here.
and we are podcast name in brackets. Okay, so today we're gonna be talking a look at um, the top 5 best scary movies, or the way I defined it, movies that actually scared me as a kid, or young adult, or something like that. How about you?
So we're not necessarily ranking these in terms of our favorites or which we think are best, but instead of, or at least I'm putting these in terms of which sort of scared me or unsettled me the most. I do have a few of my bottom choices are movies that more unsettled me because I was having a hard time thinking of movies that I have seen that have actually stayed with me after I've sort of left the theater and gone home. So some of these are more unsettling than scary for me, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, there's a few that stayed with me for a long time. Especially when you watch things as kids. I can watch them now, but as a kid, those things are just don't ever show them to your kids. Like you'll mess them up a bit,
Yep.
like really nervously. I mean, you were messed up by your honorable mention, weren't you?
I wouldn't say messed up, but yes, when I was maybe 4 or 5, I didn't put the movie on the list because I don't even remember the title exactly, but it was a Winnie the Pooh movie where Pooh and all of his friends are looking for Christopher Robin, and they come into this cave, and for some reason they've lost the map, and they all get split up. And I was trying to think of movies from my childhood that I was scared of, and that one was the only one I could think of. So
Yeah. And for me, other honorable mentions would be The Others. I don't actually remember that movie at all. My my mother and sister, they would watch it a few times, but I don't remember anything about it. So must not be good. Um, then there's The Village, which is M. Night Shyamalan. Not a good movie, but I do remember seeing that in theaters and thinking that monster was pretty scary for a kid anyway. And lastly, I had another one that was interesting. Oh yeah, I don't remember the name of it. All I can remember very vividly is that there's this kind of drill. Someone throws a kitten into that drill, and there's lots of blood. And it made me sad because I like cats.
interesting.
Anyway, let's start with number 5. With you, Matthew.
Okay, so my number 5 is again not really a scary movie, but more of an unsettling one, and it is the 2017 movie The Killing of a Sacred Deer. It's directed by the Greek director Yorgos Lanthimos, who is probably most known for his 2009 film Dogtooth and his 2018 film The Favorite. Killing of a Sacred Deer is very different from The Favorite. The Favorite is like a comedy. The Killing of a Sacred Deer is a sort of slow burn thriller. And it follows a surgeon, and after a botched surgery, the son of the patient puts a curse on the surgeon's family that they will all get sick and die unless one of them is sacrificed. So the movie kind of follows as this family is slowly deteriorating in physical condition as they sort of wrestle with the question of, is it better to sacrifice one person or not have that sort of psychological burden. Yeah, it's very unsettling. There's a scene near the end of the film that was absolutely devastating. I don't think I've quite been as unsettled by a film as I was by this one. I haven't even revisited it since I first saw it because it was just really, it stayed with me a while after.
Hmm. Interesting. Any other things you want to talk about that one? Because I don't really know about it.
Um, it's a very well made film, but it is also very difficult to recommend just because of it's very dark, and yeah, it deals with some very heavy questions. So, but yeah, it is, if you enjoy that kind of like psychological horror, then it's really a satisfying film, but also very unsettling.
Yeah. My number five is one that don't exactly classify as a scary movie. It's another M. Night Shyamalan. It's Signs, which is either good or bad depending on how you look at it. Yeah, you know about this movie, right?
Yes, I haven't seen it, but I am familiar.
Ah, okay. Basically, is that there's signs that aliens are coming back, and they don't like wood, and they are killed by water. Perfect.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's pretty much that's it. That's it right there. That's the whole movie. Is there's a setup that aliens are coming. Ooh, the crop circles. Ooh, I got one in my garage. They don't like wood. Ooh. Uh, yeah. For me as a kid, especially, I don't like aliens. Like aliens coming and invading, they take over Earth. That's a scary thing as a kid, cause like you tend to believe things like that, and so seeing the aliens at the end kind of scary. Granted, the CGI today is just terrible for that, but yeah, back then it was kind of scary. Not that much. There's another movie that's not on my list here. That's somewhat similar. Pretty much everything on my list has to do with aliens, but the other one is Battle Los Angeles, where aliens come in and they're fighting the army, and it's like again, aliens. I don't like aliens.
Yeah, I haven't seen Signs. I've heard mixed reviews from different people, so I've never really wanted to watch it. But yeah, I've heard, since I'm part of and we're part of the generation that kind of grew up with, that was one of the big movies when we were kids. I have definitely met a few people who were traumatized by it.
Yeah, I think I saw this in a hotel room.
Okay.
I think that's one of the movies I saw this in my hotel room. That and another one that's on the list here. But I've only seen it once, and I've only seen afterwards just reviews about the movie and nothing much else. Not rewatched it. I don't really care to, because it's not interesting enough. But yeah, aliens. If you're at all interested in aliens, go check it out. Sure, why not?
Okay, on to number 4.
Yeah.
So, my number 4 is a film that I've seen a bit more recently, and that is the 1977 version of Suspiria. Again, this is a movie that more unsettled me than actually scared me. It's a classic horror film that is sort of very visually unique. During the daytime scenes, everything looks kind of normal, but then once the sun goes down, the sets are all drenched in sort of these bright, colorful lights. So you have like blues and reds, and it's very sort of fantastical. And that's where all of the horror takes place. So the blood is weird colors, and it's very sort of in your face. The soundtrack is very intense, and yeah, it just has a lot of in your face horror. There's a scene that I very distinctly remember where maggots start falling through the ceiling onto one of the characters' faces. Um, and yeah, it didn't stay with me as long as The Killing of a Sacred Deer, but I think it more fits the sort of traditional definition of a horror movie. And yeah, it's a very simple, straightforward story, but the way the visuals and the way it is told is very it catches your eye and it stays with you for a while after.
Yeah. I've never seen this one. I don't think I've ever heard of this one. When did this one come out?
1977.
Oh, yeah, no. I would not know. So
The remake, which came out in 2018, is also very good. It's very different.
Did you put that on your list?
No, I did not put the remake on my list. Just because I put this one on my list, and the remake is.
No, I mean like on that podcast, that 2018.
Oh yes.
List.
Oh no, not on the 2018 list because I hadn't seen it when we made that podcast.
Okay.
But it is a very different. It's still a horror movie, but much slower and more somber. So I didn't really. That one never really stayed with me the way this one did, even though I do prefer it. I think the original is more scary, whereas the new one is more melancholy.
Yeah. Shout out to another honorable mention. It's a Nicolas Cage movie called Knowing. And pretty much the Earth is going to be destroyed by solar flares, and there's like a list of deaths that are going to happen of just disasters and catastrophes, and like the end of the list is coming down to there being no one else. And so the movie is just about finding out, oh no, the Earth's going to get destroyed, and then some weird angel things take children to the Garden of Eden and the Earth gets destroyed. Strange. Not exactly a scary movie, but kind of interesting. But going on to my number 4. This is the only one that has nothing to do with aliens. And that's the film, movie, or series Left Behind. Now this is a series, this is a Christian series of movies that's based off of the Revelations, the book of Revelations, somewhat. And it depicts a possible future of where the rapture comes, people are left behind, and what happens in that new set of years in the world order. I watched this when I was a little kid, and the idea of being left behind scared me as a little kid. That it led me to learning more about Jesus, and that's how I became a Christian. Was through watching this movie and understanding what's going on here. This kind of scares me. And so, yeah, whenever I was a kid, and I was alone in the house, and I'd call out to my mom or dad, and they do not respond, and I look around the house, there's no one there, my immediate thought is, oh my gosh, I've been left behind. And so I just sit around, just wait for something to happen, and eventually they'd come home. And like, even sometimes when I'm an adult, I kind of just in the back of my mind, what if hypothetically this did happen? I know that's not, but what if it did? And so yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I watched the Left Behind movies. I read a lot of the books growing up. It's definitely an interesting series. It takes a lot of theological liberties. There's a great...
Yeah, the books themselves, especially the young adult books, there's 40 of them. They're very good. They follow the group of teenagers and young adults that were left behind, and those are fun reads. There's 40 of them. I own all of them. I've only read 5 of them, and yeah, they're a good read. I'd recommend it.
Personally, I wouldn't recommend it. There's a great video by the YouTube channel Renegade Cut. It's like a 2-hour deep dive into sort of the politics and theology behind Left Behind. And that kind of, I hadn't thought of the series in a while, but when I saw it, it kind of changed my opinions of it a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that the movies or the books are particularly well made or well written, especially not from a horror stance, but
No.
just the concept of it is very gripping.
Yeah, it is. Which then, going on to number 3.
Yeah, so my number 3, speaking of pseudo-religious films, is The Exorcist. This is the 1973 classic horror film, and I hadn't seen it until earlier this year. I was doing a classic horror film binge, just to kind of get a feel for what the genre was like. And I was really surprised watching it that it's one of those movies that is very well hyped up, and there are moments from it that sort of everyone knows whether they've seen it or not. But I was really surprised just how effective it was, even knowing that. It's still a very gripping film, even if you kind of know what's going to happen and know all of the special effects going on behind the scenes and all of that stuff. It's it's just it's very deserving of its sort of designation as one of the best horror movies of all time. And it's probably the best movie on my list, but again, it didn't, like, in terms of sticking with me long after I had seen it, it didn't really do much for me, and even in the moments, it was very tense, but I was never really scared, I don't think.
Okay.
But yeah, it's an excellent movie.
Right. I've never seen this movie. I heard about this movie. I know about this movie. I've seen clips here and there. I've seen reviews, but I've never actually seen it because I was never interested in seeing these kind of movies. One thing that I just do not like, that it does unnerve me a lot of times whenever I see stuff like this, is just things related to spiritual entities and demonic possessions. I can't watch those things. Like, they make me feel uneasy, and so that's one reason why I've never watched this film, because I don't really want to feel uneasy. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say it is, if you are comfortable watching it, it is very worthwhile. But yeah, I mean, with anything in the horror genre, there's going to be people who just aren't interested in that. I mean, the appeal of horror can be a little bit sort of, you have to want to be afraid to a certain extent, so.
Yeah. By the way, there's a pigeon in your room.
Oh, good.
That's just what I keep hearing. Anyway, on to my number 3 is the movie Mars Attacks. This is not a good movie. It's a terrible movie. It's a Tim Burton movie. It's another one about aliens. But this is another movie that I saw in the hotel room with signs. And this one scared me as a kid. Because you got these aliens from Mars that come to Earth and they kill people. They got these ray guns, they shoot people, and they turn to skeletons, turn to dust. It's kind of graphic when you watch it as a kid. The aliens, they're creepy. They're these brain things, like a huge brain in a bubble head. They have the same voice, like ack ack. that's just not fun. They're pretty much minions if they were aliens and they killed people. That's what they are. But yeah, the visual of them killing and all the fun ways that they killed was very interesting. And the aliens are in the end of the movie. They're killed by music, by I don't know, some music that's not very good. I think it was a joke about something. And it's interesting. As a kid, it's gross. I don't really recommend it to watch it to your kids because it's not the greatest. The animation is the CGI is terrible. It's not good. It's But yeah, that's what I gotta say about that one.
Yeah, I've never seen it, so I don't really have anything to say about it.
Yeah, I remember almost everything about that film. I remember almost the entire film.
Okay.
I. That's how much it kind of scared me. Again, aliens. I don't like aliens.
Yeah.
There's a scene where someone gets their finger bitten off. There's the thingies. They take a person's head, cut it off, and attach it to a chihuahua's head. And they put the chihuahua's head on the human's body, and they're alive and they're moving around. That's graphic. Gross. And yeah, it's not a great movie, but yeah, it's one that scared me for the longest time. I've never rewatched it. But yeah, I bet now I can watch it again and not be scared, but still, it's fun.
Yeah. So, my number 2 movie is a recent movie, came out last year in fact, and it is Uncut Gems. So this is probably stretching the definition of horror. This is definitely not a horror movie really by any stretch of the imagination. But this is one of the tensest films I've ever seen. And it follows a gem seller played by Adam Sandler as he kind of goes about his day-to-day life, sort of swindling people out of their money and then trying to pay off his debts before they become due. And it's just this slowly building intensity throughout the film that ends with like an incredibly tense scene, and then yeah, it just all comes to a head. And it starts out a little bit like, it starts out sort of slower and it takes a little while, but before you know it, you're kind of on the edge of your seat, just like, is this bet going to pay off? Can he pay off all of his debts? What's going to happen next? It's really incredibly well constructed, and yeah, it's more tense than any horror film I've really seen that I can remember.
Yeah, I've never seen this one. I've seen the trailers in the theaters, and that's about it. It's not really something that interests me at all, and that's fine. But yeah, when you put that on the list, I saw that and it's like, I don't exactly saw that as being a scary movie when I saw the trailer. So yeah, that's an interesting viewpoint.
Yeah, and it is definitely worth watching. I mean, part of the reason I put it on my list is because I don't get enough opportunities to talk about it because it's just such a great film, but also it definitely deserves to be counted as one of the most intense films of the last 10 years just because it's absolute, like, you are on the edge of your seat for most of the second half of this movie. And it's insane how invested you get in this character and hoping he will somehow turn his life around. As a bunch of people are, of course, chasing after him and threatening him and his family. So yeah, it's great. It's very different from any other Adam Sandler movie out there. It is definitely not a comedy. Um, but yeah, it's really great. And I believe it's currently on Netflix as well, so pretty easy to get your hands on as well.
Yeah. So my number two film here is Aliens versus Predator. Um, I first saw this years ago. I think around 2007. A friend of my sister came to the house, brought her a DVD case with films, and they watched this one, and I watched it with them. This is my introduction to the world of Aliens and the world of the Predator series, and it captivated me. Now this movie's PG-13. It's probably the least horror out of sorry, it's probably the least one to scare you out of all the other ones. But as a kid, that doesn't matter. The basic concept about them is intriguing and scary at the same time. This is the first time I get to see the facehugger and what they do to humans and how the alien is born. And then you got the predators, which are they're nice guys when you get to know them, but they're still abusive when you first meet them. Uh, this is one that stuck with me for a long time. I remembered it visually, vividly, um, and I learned to love it. I learned to watch the Alien and Predator series, and I love them. I love them all. I love this one as well. Um, it wasn't until Alien vs. Predator Requiem, the sequel to this one, where it kind of messes you up because there's a hospital scene that's very graphic and very vivid, and it's really gross, and it messes you up. But this one was my introduction to the series. I got some dreams, somewhat nightmares, from this concept, but I got into it. So yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one specifically, but I have seen one of the Predator movies and quite a few of the Alien movies. Um, and yeah, it's a very great series in terms of horror and thriller. I think especially the first Alien movie, I considered putting it on my list, just because that's a great horror film. But yeah, I mean, it's a great series overall, and yeah.
Yeah. And let's finally go to number one here.
Okay, so my number one is probably the first horror movie that I saw in terms of it being like specifically just horror. I believe I did see Alien before this, but this is The Conjuring. And this is a 2013 sort of haunted house movie. But it's interesting for quite a few reasons. I think for me, since it was my first horror movie and I was less familiar with the tropes of the genre and all of that, it scared me a bit more than anything else. Also, it is based on a supposedly true story, so that adds an extra element. But this was a game changer in the world of sort of horror films in the last decade or so, because when this came out, most big horror movies were either like Saw, very gory, or very focused on jump scares. And The Conjuring, it has jump scares, and it has very little gore, but it does have some. But what is really great about The Conjuring is the way it builds tension. It isn't very in your face, it's very subtle in how it builds horror, and it changed it brought horror back to that more prestige genre rather than just being about blood and gore and jump scares.
Yeah. Yeah, I've not seen this movie. I remember it was a big deal when it came out. And once again, like I said earlier, I don't really like getting into things to do with paranormal stuff, and so yeah, I couldn't get into this film at all. But I heard that people enjoy it. I know that I think you enjoyed it, right?
Yes, it is a very worthwhile watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, like, most of the horror films that were successful and came out in the last 5 years probably wouldn't have been quite the same if The Conjuring hadn't come out, just because it reinvigorated the genre in a way that it hadn't been in a long time. And it's, I think, worth noting that it is directed by the same person who directed the first Saw movie, so he's kind of reinvented the horror genre multiple times. And he also did Aquaman, so a very varied career.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, going on to my number one. This is a movie that has stayed with me for a long, long time. I saw this one in theaters, and yeah, it scared the heck out of me. It still makes me nervous whenever I watch it, and it's surprisingly War of the Worlds. Have you ever seen this one?
I have not. I have read the book, though the book is very different from the movie.
Yeah, it's a Steven Spielberg movie. It's admittedly not the best, but it has a fantastic sound design that's just very menacing, and it sticks with you. Again, another movie about aliens. Martians come down to Earth on these tripod machines, and they blast folks. They start blasting, and they take people, they suck their blood, they spray it onto the Earth, and they create these vines out of flesh and stuff that's red, and they try to make a new Mars. In the end, turns out that aliens are allergic to germs, and they die. And it's great. But yeah, I watched this as a kid, and these aliens scared me. There's a moment as well in the movie where they're in a basement, and the tripods send down this little periscope tube thingy into the basement to look at things. That's a really unnerving scene. And then of course the aliens themselves take a look. There's a lot of close calls. They take over boats. They do lots of stuff. But yeah, this one, the visual of it scared me as a kid. Like, everywhere I went, I would see a poster of it. I'd see just an image of it, and I immediately just get really nervous. It kind of scared me. And it took me a long time for me to rewatch this movie, because I was just so messed up from it that's like really hard to get into. But whenever I watched it again, like, I can watch it now, and I'm fine with watching it. It's not the scariest, but there's still a bit of anxiousness that comes from a long time of just fearing this movie. And so yeah, that's my history with this film.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I do know that Steven Spielberg, I think one of his, as he's made more like Ready Player One or The Post, those types of movies, I think it's really interesting how he's kind of moved away from suspense, but he's very good at that. I mean, Jaws is a really suspenseful film even now, even knowing what happens. So yeah, and it's kind of too bad that he hasn't yet directed a sort of straight up horror movie, but a lot of his movies kind of hit similar spots.
Yeah. But yeah, these are the films that helped shape and define me and horror. And most of it has to do with aliens. and them invading and them coming and taking over and killing people. Which I don't believe in aliens, but if they did, and if this were the visual that they came with, that's a bit an unnerving feeling to have. Definitely after War of the Worlds, I just don't like having windows, rooms with windows in it. I'm fine with windows, but when you go to bed at night, and whenever you think about a possible emergency situation, you don't want to have a lot of windows in your house if the aliens are coming down. And so yeah, I don't like windows. So yeah, there's no. That's a weird thing to say, but sure, yeah, that's what I gotta say.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say here?
I don't think I have been to quite the same level affected by any of the movies that I listed. Probably in part because I have seen all of these later in my life. I tried to come up with a list of movies from when I was a kid, but then, as I said before, the only one I could remember was the Winnie the Pooh one. But yeah, I mean, horror can be a fun genre, and yeah, I would say I have seen many worthwhile horror movies.
Alright. With that said, yeah, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.